We're just getting ready. We're going to start at 1. We're glad you're here.
There you go.
Is there anything else I have to do? Go live. Uh-oh. See, now I'm nervous. There we are. Okay, we connected to Facebook Live as well. So welcome everyone. My name is Tamara with Love in a Big World, and with me today is Terrance Cirvant French. And I'm so excited. We have been friends a long time. I've worked together a long time, and I'm excited for him to share his story with you as we talk about how we can build community engagement. So Terrance, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes. And can you tell us a bit more about yourself?
Yeah. So I grew up here in Nashville, Tennessee, in the community of University Court, J.C. Napier. Grew up with a single mom who eventually died of HIV when I was 12 years old. My dad wasn't around when I grew up. Grew up pretty rough family of drug users, drug sellers as well. Suffered sexual abuse when I was younger, which led to me, to my brokenness, and ended up dropping out of school and just living crazy life. And eventually went back to school, got my GED, went to Tribeca, joined Love in a Big World. And that put me on the journey that I'm on now.
So what is your motivation for the work that you do in communities, both here in the States and then also around the world?
My motivation has been my life, how I grew up, knowing my story, knowing the empty parts of my story, like not having a dad, not having, in the neighborhood I grew up in, for boys, they cater mostly to sports and football and basketball, which I have very little interest in either. So for me, it's been finding those voids for other kids and other people and trying to fill those voids. And music has been a big part, but also poetry and writing and seeing something spark in a kid that everybody else had given up on. And healing those wounded parts of them by just telling my story and letting them tell their story. I found vulnerability has to be one of my biggest gifts, is the gift of being vulnerable with others, which creates a space for them to be vulnerable with me, which kind of heals where they're at, but also pushes them forward. Mm-hmm. So healing as I go, I guess.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So there's a lot of, and this is one of those questions we didn't necessarily prepare for, but as you're talking about growing up in public housing and single mom, her death when you were very young, and the other different elements in your family, what I hear is trauma.
Yeah.
And there's a big conversation happening in education today around trauma-informed practice. Mm-hmm. So as one who has lived in trauma and is now working with students, what do you see as the greatest need? How do you help, or how can we as caring adults help kids heal from their trauma? I mean, you mentioned vulnerability, but what are some other practical things that we can do?
I think vulnerability, having a conversation, because a lot of times kids don't know that they've experienced trauma. They think what has happened in their life is it just happened, just natural. It's because they see it in their communities, they see it in their homes, and everybody else around them is experiencing it. They don't recognize that this is bad. This is what has happened isn't supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I think putting something different in front of a child to let them to see them to themselves helps them. You can't heal from what you don't know you don't need healing from. You know what I mean? If you haven't seen it, you can't deal with it. So I think having conversations around what has happened, what is right, what is good, what is healthy, and what is whole, and putting that in front of a kid, and that looks different for each kid. Like you can't go neighborhood I grew up in. You can't just say this is right. This is the right way of doing it. And this is the wrong way of doing it. I think there's a healthy way of living, and there's a healthy way of seeing self that needs to be introduced rather than right or wrong. You know what I mean? So it's not about like, it's pushing them towards a healthy way of living and a healthy way of being themselves, and realizing that what has happened can be healed and you can move past it. So that starts with vulnerability, but also conversation, also getting them outside of the environment. Like I take my kids to lake house, we go camping, we do trips around the state. We go outside of what is normal. So what is their normal, to see a different norm, but also have conversations around what we see, the difference in how other people do community and do life, which provokes a conversation as to how they do life and how's it working for them. So stepping outside that, for me, my greatest healing came from getting outside of what I'd always seen, the people that I've always been around, seeing something different, which caused me to look back and say, wait, I don't have to be stuck in that. That's better. So
there's a lot that you just said, and I'm going to unpack a few things.
Okay.
So you mentioned your kids. Who are the kids that you're working with now?
So currently I work for a ministry called Preston Ministries. We're in inner city Nashville, in the inner city part of Nashville. And yeah, so I work with a high school. I work as a high school and Thrive director. So my kids are from 9th to 12th grade and the first year of college, or whatever they do after that first year of graduation.
And then you talked, so that these kids, just to dive in a little bit more there, these kids that you're working with, they look a lot like you did.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. A lot of them have similar, if not the same story, similar backgrounds. A lot of them, most of my kids, like their parents are my age or younger, which is interesting. Yeah. So like parents who went to high school with me or went to another high school. So yeah, their stories are very, very similar to mine. So we connect in that place of, I know their struggle. I know what they've seen. I know what the place they're in looks like and feels like, so I can relate to it, but I can pull them, say, hey, I can point them in a different direction.
Right. So then you mentioned a lot about, what I heard you say was getting outside of just rules of saying this is the way you do something, to being healthy, which is, it sounds like there's a lot more freedom in that, but can you define, what do you mean by healthy? What does healthy look like?
I think healthy looks like freedom. Healthy looks like freedom. Healthy looks like being whole. It looks like being able to make good choices for yourself and for others around you. It sounds like loving the big world, but it's true. I think like the more healthy I become, the more I feel better. I want better for myself, but I'm also looking at others around me. It looks like going after things that push you forward, that help you. It just, I think healthy is being completely how you were meant to be. Because I think trauma and life kind of breaks that in us, and we aren't able to be our full and whole self. And once we dive into healing that trauma and healing ourselves, then we're able to reach our full potential. So I think the more healthy you become, the more you realize your potential. to become a better you.
Yeah, and your purpose, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You find your reason for being.
Yep.
Yes.
All of that, like health. The more I heal, the more I realize that I was created with so much good in me, and so much potential to do and be the good. That because of trauma, because of life, because of death, all this stuff happens, and it kind of stops you in the moment.
Right.
And you got to heal that place so you can go push past it.
That's so good.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a couple things too, as you've been talking. You mentioned about getting kids beyond their communities, beyond what's familiar. So what are some of the things that you've done personally? Share with all of us. Where have you gone, or what have you done that's really broken through what was familiar?
I think there's something to say, but my two things that have changed my life. My first trip to Brazil, Sao Paulo, Brazil, 2005, really changed me. I thought I grew up poor. I thought I grew up in lack, and then I saw poverty on that scale, and that messed my life up in a good way. It taught me the gift that I have being here in the U.S., but also the potential that I have. And that it changed my worldview to realize that the world is bigger. I can do more, I can be more. But then also going to Africa, specifically Uganda, and just seeing those kids and seeing what I've experienced with former child soldiers and the impact that I was able to make just by telling my story. And I remember leaving those moments and thinking, why did I even come? Like, why? I'm sharing my story and they're telling me about murders that they had committed, killing their parents. And I'm thinking, why am I even here? What can I do? But just sitting with them, telling my story, hearing their story, and then coming back months later and seeing how just that 5 minutes of sharing my story changed one of the kids' life. And he has a school, and he named the school after me. Just, a couple minutes of sharing my story and that relationship, that relating to one another. So that, like, getting outside of that, outside of my world here and going into somebody else's world and going into somebody else's place. And it shifted my worldview, it shifted my heart, my way of doing life, my way of relating to people. It changed me.
So you talked about taking the kids on different trips around town or even out of state, but you had this experience in Brazil and then in Uganda with kids who were in desperate need. So what are some ways that you connect the students that you're currently working with others in need? How important is that?
I think it's extremely important. And we, now we're working on doing stuff with the Nashville mission here in Nashville, but we've done mission trips to Atlanta, to Memphis, where our kids get to share and give back. But also my second book, She Stole My Heart, we did a project headed up by Sarah Norbert, who works with us. And the kids read through the book and they were able to connect to the stories and my experiences of Africa, and to talk back and hear about what's going on in the world around them. So just connecting through practical experiences, going out and doing the work, serving the communities around them, giving back to the kids who are younger than them, but also reading books that open up a whole new world and having a conversation about that experience.
So part of what I hear you saying is healing from trauma can come through service.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think the more I give, the more I serve others, the more as I'm giving, I'm being healed. You know what I mean? Like the more I go out and I serve and I do the work, it's kind of like it's healing me at the same time.
So I want to go back to something you said about the parents. You mentioned that a lot of the parents of the students that you work with are your age. I know from the work that I've done and from being a parent myself, a single mom too, that sometimes I have felt ostracized because of my experience from educators at school. So how do you, as a leader at a nonprofit and a leader in community, help bridge the gap between you who are helping their kids and the parents? Like, what do you do to foster relationship with parents, aunties, grandparents?
I think it is realizing that you have to foster a relationship. It has to be like I go to dinner at my kids' parents' house. They invite me out. They cook for me. They come to my house. You know, like it has to. I think there's a wall that we think has to exist in order for us to do the job that we do. And in reality, that wall doesn't need to exist for us to do the job and to do it well, to do it right. Like for me, it's been the more I walk with my students and my kids, the more I learn about their parents, and the conversation between us goes deeper. I have students now who are graduated who are no longer in my program, but I still have a relationship with their parent. I still have a relationship with the kid because it's extended beyond, hey, this is what he does and this is who we are. We've become a team that pushes the student. It's about us partnering together. And that's how I sell it to the parent. I'm not saying that I want your kid to be a part of my program. I'm saying that, hey, I want to push your kid. I want to help you push your kid and help them excel. Can we do this together? Can we partner in this to push your kid together? Rather than, hey, I'm going to do all this stuff for your kid. Are you cool with it? No, let's do it together. Because it makes
such a different posture.
Because they have to come along with you. And I'm coming alongside the parents. So it's like they get that second help. And a lot of our students, a lot of students that I work with don't have fathers. So you get to play a role, that male role that a lot of them don't get to take on. And the parents are welcoming it. I mean, like, I've seen the graduations where my last graduation this past spring, where one of my kids were walking in and walking by, and the mom screams, "Hey, okay, well, Mr. Terrence, here go your dad." You know, and I've become dad in those roles, and it's because we partnered with them. It's not us and them. It's, hey, this is community. It's what community looks like, and this is what community pushing your kids looks like. So we push them together. So if the kid gets in trouble, the mom calls me, I call the kid. And he doesn't get to escape it. He realizes that we're together on this. So that's what it looks like to me. It looks like tearing down that wall that we think we have to have in order to build a healthy relationship, a healthy conversation that pushes the kid forward.
So I hear you saying it's we.
Yeah.
We are a team.
Yeah.
The organization, the school, the family, whatever the family looks like. And there's no room for judgment in that. There's just an acceptance and an embracing of, most importantly, the child, and wanting to help them move forward. So this sounds like it takes a lot of time. Like, I'm just thinking about, my own life and thinking about the people who are joining us today. And please feel free. I know we have one question. If you have questions as we're talking, you can send that to us. We're going to get to those in a few minutes. But it sounds like this takes a lot of time and requires a lot of conversation.
Yeah, I think it becomes not a job, but a way of doing life. So for me, it's not my job, it's my way of doing life. So I don't have to clock my hours from 9 to 5. It becomes, this is life. So I'm getting calls. I get calls from kids at whatever time they call me, and I answer the call. And I talk to the parents whenever we can have a conversation. It becomes not, hey, you're restricted to this time, but this is the way we do life. And we become a family. We talk about, we have meals together every meeting. We have meals together. We have conversation. Parents are invited.
So good.
All that. So it becomes, this is the way I've chosen to do my life, to do my, and that's my job. That lifestyle is my job.
So when I hear you talking about that and the fact of building community and this being a lifestyle for you, it reminds me you're gonna laugh, but it reminds me of shows like Little House on the Prairie, or you know what I mean? It's or Good Times, or like Gilmore Girls, and where any of those places, Cheers. I mean, wherever you like those shows that we love and we gravitate towards, where people just build community and they see each other on a regular basis, and it's like we're doing life together.
Right. Yeah. It is. I think I see my kids often, even when I'm not supposed to see my kids. But it becomes that. It becomes when something happens, we are the ones they call. It becomes, hey, this is happening this weekend. We're having a family dinner. You coming? It's not even a coming. This is the time you're supposed to be there. And it becomes just like that, where we are meant to live in community. Like we're built to live in community. We're built to live life together. And so what is natural, you kind of long for it. And a lot of us are struggling, and our kids are struggling because we've left that part out of it. We think this is my kid, I'll raise it by myself, or we think that's their kid, let them handle it by themselves, instead of coming alongside, doing life together. I have a kid now who moved into the community, and he's been in the community for about 10 years. But within that 10 years, the mom has kept him in the house because she's afraid of the community. So this kid doesn't talk. He comes to I invited him, had to like beg him to come to program. When he gets to program, he didn't talk to any of the kids. He sat there quietly. He didn't eat. I had a big spread of food. He didn't eat, he just sat there quietly. And we just kept trying to engage him. My other kids were trying to engage him. And by the end of the night, we kind of coerced him into getting ice cream. He went and got ice cream. Then I dropped him off at home. He got out of the car, and I looked back at the kids, and they were like, he's definitely not coming back. Then I get a call Monday morning from his mom crying, talking about the experience that he had and how she's never seen our kid respond that way. And he was so happy. He talked about the food and all this stuff. And I was like, he didn't even eat the food, but he talked about the whole experience that he had within that community. And she was like, how do I get more of that? How do I get my kid involved in more of that? And we just talked about that. And now he's in programming. He's about to work for us, and he's doing well. I took him on one of our trips to Lake House, and he went. He ate at the lake house. He swam with the kids. He talked to the kids. He became just like one of the other kids. But it took that community where my kids know the culture. We talk like we're family. So we have an issue, we talk about like family. We talk to each other just as real as I grew up talking to my family. So he became involved in that, and that began to heal a lot of the places in him that had been traumatized by being alone and being in fear of the community. So,
right. That's so good.
Yeah.
So how do you see schools, nonprofits, churches that are in a community like Preston Taylor or like maybe your University Court? How do you see those different entities working together to build community for families and students?
I think if you take out that wall again of what it was meant, how we're supposed to operate, and it becomes about helping the whole child, then it becomes easier to realize, you have this to offer, I have this to offer, I have this to offer. Let's work together to see how all of us putting all our resources together can push these children forward. I think it becomes about changing the culture of the community. If we can work together to change the culture of the community, then that child experiences life differently and it propels them forward.
So what I hear you saying too is that it's not about competing agendas.
No.
It's about being very open with your resources for the sake of the children.
For the sake of the child.
And the families.
Because I think if my job is to educate the child, my job is to educate. I can't worry about the other things that go on. But in order for them to be educated, these other things need to happen. So if I found another source, which would be if the church could do this on the weekend, that child could eat, and I don't have to worry about either eating over the weekend or, you know, the after school program can make sure that their homework is getting done, so I don't have to worry, you know. So if we realize, if we take off our blinders of this is what I'm supposed to do, and focus on, hey, this child needs this, and this community, this aspect has it, and work together to he'll push the child forward. I think we do a lot well. But it's community again. I think it's operating in community the way we're meant to live as humans. So
yeah, and I love that, and I think again it just requires us setting aside our own agendas in order to be able to have success for everyone.
Right.
Because when the kids win, then we win.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I want to move to these questions. I see a chat coming in. How do we accomplish this? These kinds of things that you're talking about. How do we accomplish this?
I think it's by having a conversation. It's about trying different things. It's about experiencing different things. It's about going to the school and saying, as a church, hey, how can we help you? How can we volunteer? What are the needs of your kids? It's about schools going to the nonprofits and to the churches around them saying, hey, we're teaching the kids in this community. What are some ways that we can push our kids into your spaces that will help them in what we do? I think it's about having those conversations about not being afraid to take the risk of going into the church or going into the schools or the nonprofits. It's about opening your doors and saying, how can we work together? And just mapping that out and seeing, like, I think Preston Taylor, they do church, nonprofit and schools very well. And we also, our setups are in, like, I work out of one of the churches in the community.
Okay.
So we get them from school. We know about their teachers. We have some of our people going into the schools and getting information about the kids, but also we're in their churches and we are the nonprofit. So we know the family. So they are surrounded by people who care and love them. But it started with having a conversation about, hey, we're going to be in this community. How can we partner together?
So from a really practical standpoint, what I hear is we need to move out of our offices or out of our own building and go and meet other people that we know are serving the same community.
I mean, we're educated. You're educated, and your degree is in teaching, so your job is there. But at the heart of every teacher, I believe, is a person who cares about people, and so you're more concerned about the person than you are the agenda of educator. So it's about taking that risk of saying, hey, if I'm going to be able to educate, if I'm going to educate this child properly, all this other stuff needs to be handled. It is just going out and having those conversations and doing the work. Yeah.
So again, what I hear is it takes time.
It takes time.
And requires conversation.
Conversation to bring community. Yeah, and that has to be the goal. Like, it has to be the goal to help the kid.
That's great. I write a lot of notes while we're talking, so I know what to ask next. And that's a really good thing I want to save for later. So here's a question that came in from someone. Our school struggles to engage parents and caregivers. How can we get families' attention to relay the message of that their involvement in their child's life and education is extremely important?
Yeah, that's been, that was one of my hardest ones of, like, you got to realize that in a lot of communities, in inner city communities, or kids who have parents who aren't educated or haven't been to school, to see past your 9 to 5 and making sure that kid eats and is going to school is hard enough. So to push them in education is something that you understand, but you don't really understand. It takes not asking the parent to come to the school all the time, but going to the home.
That's good.
Or
really
a place
practical.
where they feel welcomed and safe to talk about it. If they see you're concerned and really want to see that child grow and be healthy and be whole, then it changes the whole conversation of come to this school, come to where we're at. but go to where they're at, going to finding a community center or a place where they frequent, or the kid goes, and having a conversation around there. It's about getting them on in a place where they feel safe to come and talk to, where they feel like this is ours too, rather than going to. I think the challenge of seeing a school as a place where you can speak your mind or speak freely, or you can let your guard down. Because realistically, when you go to a school, a parent goes to a school, 9 times out of 10, they prepared themselves to go into a different environment, a different culture, a different world with a different experience. So you don't take yourself in, you take whatever personification of yourself. Mm-hmm. That's what you take into that environment. So it's about, do I feel vulnerable? Do I feel I'm in a space with this grouping of people where I can let my guard down and have a conversation about my child, mm-hmm. without the threat of you judging me or you. And I think that goes in, am I taking care of my kid? Are they clean? All that stuff. So when I send them there, I send them looking their best. Mm-hmm. So I don't want you to see that we're actually struggling behind the scenes. So I think, again, it's tearing down that wall that separates us. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And giving them, and it's sad to say, I think it is the responsibility of we, the educators, to extend that branch, to go into the neighborhood, to go into the community and say, hey, I'm here for you. I'm here to help.
Right. Yeah. So just to summarize that, I'm hearing we need to make sure that we're communicating a positive message to mm-hmm. parents, so they don't feel like they or their kids are in trouble all the mm-hmm. time when they see our faces. Right. And then also provide a neutral place for us to meet, right. where the parent feels safe. Yeah. Because school might have been a bad experience for them.
Yeah. And if you've only experienced school as a student, then you don't know that, hey, the teacher is actually a person with a family with, yeah. who probably struggles the same way yeah. as we do. So yes, it's having a conversation, and it's saying, I'm a parent as well. I know the struggles of being a parent. How can we help you? How can we push your student along?
Mm-hmm. That's so good.
I think that vulnerability, that going out and extending that, it changes. I've seen where people send their kids to me, and I'm working with their kids, and they have no involvement, versus when I go and I sit on the couch of mom, we just sit and talk, and we talking about life and the student. And then all of a sudden, hey, when can I cook one of the meals for you guys? And the mm-hmm. parent gets involved, and yeah. it shifts how they view the program, and then the kid begins to change how he responds to the program. So it's about going and sitting on the couches.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
It's about that. It's about trying to figure out, even in that small season of life, that 1 year, how can we do life together? How can we come alongside you? Mm-hmm. Which is hard for educators, because you do have your own life and your own things at home, but I think it's worth the risk.
Mm-hmm. So. Well, we are out of time. Thank you all for joining us today. Just to summarize again what Terrance has been talking about, it's the power of story, vulnerability, yeah. tearing down the walls, making time, having conversations. These are the things that help us build community engagement. Focusing on the positive with our students and with the parents, letting the parents know that we value them, that we're there as a team to help support them. These are the things that can make real and lasting change. So thank you again for joining us. If you want to know more about Terrance and his work, he has 2 books available on Amazon.com, Wounded Healer, Memoirs and Poems of a Broken Boy, that talks about his own story of trauma and healing. And then She Stole My Heart, Poems and Lessons of Africa, that he talked about, his students have read. Also Cirvant.com, and that's CIRVANT.com. He is an author, a speaker, spoken word artist, playwright, phenomenal artist in his own right, and community advocate. So feel free to reach out to him and utilize his services. This is Tamara for Love in a Big World. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.